I went to college. Of course, I took the course from another person that you don't know, and a lot of people might not know because that was a long time ago. That was in 1963 that I took the course with George Harvey.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. This is amazing. One of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I learned so many things. You took his class?
I hope I'm remembering everything because I don't tell everybody how this all started.
You were actually one of his students.
With one question, and look what happens. I'm going crazy. But anyway, George was tough. He would come around with his scissors, and if your wings were crooked, cut them right off with the scissors. Better make those straight the next time. Anyway, I love the guy. And we became friends, and every time I went back to trout season at Pennsylvania, it was always at State College. And I would go trout fishing and always stop at his house on Friday and say hello, and he'd check out my equipment and criticize it. I didn't know you had to clean your fly lines. He said, you got all these cracks in your fly line. I said, yeah, I know. It sticks a lot when I cast. Yeah. Anyway, he was so instrumental in making me love the sport. That was way before I even started thinking about the show.
Loop to Loop is sponsored by Patagonia, high-performing outerwear made responsibly for our planet. G. Loomis, American-made fly rods manufactured in Woodland, Washington. Airflow, next-gen PVC-free fly lines with new tech, new formulas, and the same obsession. Dynaking, precision-built vices to last a lifetime. Ross Reels, high-performance reels designed, machined, anodized, and assembled in Colorado for more than 50 years. It is our great honor today to be joined by Chuck Furimsky, who knows people like Bob Popovics and Lefty Kreh, knew them very well. You are an influential person in the fly fishing industry because you created the Fly Fishing Show, which is a nationwide event that draws tens of thousands of people over the years and has changed the sport of fly fishing, taught so many people how to fly fish. Thank you for joining us today, Chuck.
Oh, thank you. I'm impressed. I didn't know I was so good.
Yeah, you made significant impacts on the sport of fly fishing. Like you completely changed our sport and how we communicate with each other, how we fish. Like a lot of these fly fishing greats that influenced us, a lot of them got their start presenting at the Fly Fishing Show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I wanted to dive into today, like how the Fly Fishing Show got started, like a little bit of history. Take us in the Wayback Time Machine, and how did the Fly Fishing Show get started?
Well, I had a visit to a show that actually was one of the first shows, I think, that was created for all fly fishing people. And that was in Michigan. Was it Detroit? It wasn't IFF, it was FFF at that time. And they put on a club show, but it was all fly fishing. And I'd never heard of such a thing because I was always at the sportsman shows in Pittsburgh. I was actually an exhibitor there. That's how I first started to think about shows and exhibiting. Huh. I watched the guy that ran the show, and it was funny. He was from New York, and he never hunted or fished in his life, but he knew how to run a show. He walked around all day. He could always ask a question, and he was there. So that's what I kind of followed in my experience with the shows. I make myself available. Everybody can stop me and see me. But anyway, I went to that show, and I met two guys that I'd never met, but I heard about them. Two Garys, Gary LaFontaine and Gary Borger. So that's the first time I really met any real pros in fly fishing and idols. And I'm thinking, this is really cool. You could go up and talk to them right there in front of them, and you could ask them anything they wanted, and they were I hardly ever met anybody that doesn't want to share what they know and created in fly fishing. You know, we just went to the football game yesterday with Joe Humphreys, and there's a guy where you did a lot of podcasts and interviews with him, but he can't stand not telling somebody what he knows immediately. But he doesn't correct them all the time. If they make a mistake, he gives them some ideas, as opposed to other people, which I won't name. There's so many people, as you said, I met. But I watched that show. To answer your question, I got back to the ski resort where I had 2 stores at the resort. And I went to the exhibit hall and I said, I could do a show here probably at this exhibit hall. So I went to the owner, and he was always good to me. He was a really good, friendly guy. He said that there's a weekend after the ski season, 1 or 2 weekends before they start to have weddings. He said, nothing's in this exhibit hall. He said, I'll tell you what, come up with a show. And I'm thinking, I just came from this fly fishing show, but I don't know anybody to invite other than the people I just met last weekend, Gary Borger and Gary LaFontaine. So I said, well, I don't think I'm ready to do something in here. Herman was his name, Herman Dupre. And I said, how much is it going to cost me? He said, well, like I said, this is a dead weekend. I'll give you the exhibit hall for free. You just load my hotel with people that want to rent rooms, drink my beer, and eat my food. But I'm not going to do any security for you. You run the show. You just do whatever you have to do to make it successful. So that was like the beginning of it. I saw a show, and it stuck in my mind, and a year went by before I even thought about trying to copy it at all, because you have to copy something that's good. But I don't want to take credit for being the only one. I take credit for being the first show that an individual did with his own money, which is scary, because if you're in a Trout Unlimited club and you don't do a good job, maybe they won't let you run it next year, but they just ask people to give more money, and people do. But how am I going to ask someone to give me money if I go bankrupt to do a lousy job?
You're gambling with your own money instead of gambling with somebody else's money. What year would have that been?
Well, that wasn't the year I started the first show, though, but that's the question you asked me. I did one thing before that. That would have been 1988, I believe, and it was called Trout Masters Weekend. And guess who I got? Someone that people knew, because I wanted to have something that would succeed. The guy's name was Lefty Kreh. Have you ever heard of Lefty Kreh?
I have.
Well, the reason I got him, this is all coming together because of what you've been doing. I was in Yellowstone Park, and I went down to, I guess it was Depews or Armstrong, I forgot which one. And I saw a couple having something for lunch at a picnic table, and I thought, I know those people, but I never met them. And I'll just go and tell them I'm from Pennsylvania, and maybe that'll open up the conversation. Well, you know who that was? Barry and Kathy Beck.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were having lunch, and they looked up, and they were real friendly. I thought they were saying, we're having lunch there, buddy. Can you come back later? They pretty much wanted me to eat lunch with them almost. And I said, well, I know who you people are, but I never met you. I just thought I'd come over and say hello, because I've respected for a lot of things I learned from what you have done with fly fishing. And I said, I wanted to ask you a question because this has been on my mind for a long time now. It was to me because I was thinking about it a lot. I said, I wanted to try doing an all-fly fishing show because I've been exhibiting at the Pittsburgh Outdoor Show with my leather goods. See, I had a leather store at Seven Springs. I'm the guy that had the leather cowboy hats, the belts, the buckles, the wallets, all the leather stuff. And the shows were real successful for me, money-wise and entertaining-wise. I enjoyed it. I said, I'm thinking of maybe doing a show, but I just want to do all fly fishing because that's what I really enjoy. I went to college of course, I took the course from another person that you don't know, and a lot of people might not know him because that was a long time ago. That was in 1963 that I took the course with George Harvey.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. This is amazing. One of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I learned so many things. You took his class?
I hope I'm remembering everything because I don't tell everybody how this all started.
You were actually one of his students.
With one question, and look what happens. I'm going crazy. But anyway, George was tough. He would come around with his scissors, and if your wings were crooked, cut them right off with the scissors. Better make those straight the next time. Anyway, I love the guy. And we became friends, and every time I went back to trout season at Pennsylvania, it was always at State College. And I would go trout fishing and always stop at his house on Friday and say hello, and he'd check out my equipment and criticize it. I didn't know you had to clean your fly lines. He said, you got all these cracks in your fly line. I said, yeah, I know. It sticks a lot when I cast. Anyway, he was so instrumental in making me love the sport. That was way before I even started thinking about the show, so I backtracked in the story. But anyway, Barry and Kathy were so nice to me. I said, who would be someone I would get, for a real celebrity that people would pay to come to the show so I don't go bankrupt, get some guy that thinks he's a fly fisherman and maybe might have one story on Fly Rod and Reel magazine instead of Fly Fisherman magazine. It wouldn't be as important. But I got Lefty Kreh's phone number from them. And I said, well, you think he's going to answer? Well, he answered. And I don't know whether Barry called him first, said, I met this guy. He's really interested in doing something different, a fly fishing show. So anyway, I didn't know enough people at that point because I wanted to have half a dozen or more celebrities. And I said, Lefty, are you free this weekend? And I told him, and I was thinking that he was going to be booked because he was always booked way in advance. So you have to call him like 2 years in advance. He said, yeah, I'm free. And I said, what do you have in mind? I said, well, people would go crazy to spend a weekend with you, the whole weekend. I said, I have an idea. I want to call it Trout Masters Weekend, and it's going to be the weekend before trout season opens in Pennsylvania. And the people come to the ski resort, and they get a room Friday and Saturday. Friday night, they have dinner with you, and then you do a program. Well, that was slide programs at that time. And then the next day, you could do whatever you want for a class. And then you could do casting outside. We have a pond real close to the entrance of the ski resort. And then they would go and fish with you. And then you'd come back to have dinner and stay with them again and fish again Sunday. They'd go home Sunday afternoon. I don't remember how much I charged, but it was like peanuts compared to what you would charge someone now. And they got everything. And there were like only 18 people. But I paid for all the food, and I paid Lefty, and he was worth it. I don't remember what I paid him, but he was worth it because he did everything great. Everybody loved him. I mean, nobody wanted to leave.
Yeah.
Sunday night would be like somebody you had spent a year with, and you hate to say goodbye. But that's how it started. It was Trout Masters Weekend. And then, of course, I stayed with Lefty for a little while that evening. We talked, and I walked over to the exhibit hall with him, and I said, Lefty, I almost thought of doing a regular show here in this exhibit hall because it's available in the spring when ski season closes. And he said, well, that's a good idea because there's fly fishing in some of the sportsman shows, but it's only a small percentage. You know Paul Fuller, probably. He did shows, and they were general sportsman shows, but he had one little section of fly fishing, and it was always popular. And I thought, wonder why someone just didn't expand that and make a whole event out of fly fishing. So that's how it all started. Lefty said, well, why don't you get some dealers in the immediate area? And, of course, at that time, there were a lot of dealers everywhere. Everybody wanted to have a fly shop, and get everything wholesale, and then they thought that's it, that's the best thing, and they found out how much work it was, and they didn't make as much money as they had predicted. Or they didn't fish as much as they thought it would be a ability to do. So anyway, we did the first show, and of course, I couldn't ignore George Harvey, so I got a hold of George, and I said, George, would you do a show for a weekend at Seven Springs Resort with Lefty Kreh? I mean, how can you go wrong with Lefty Kreh and George Harvey? But there were people that didn't know George Harvey at that time because that show was 1989, and I had been in school a lot sooner than that, and I knew him for all those years. So that's how it started. That's an answer to one question? How many are you going to ask me? I'm sorry I talk so much.
You're saying a lot of people didn't know who George was. I think he's a very interesting character because a lot of people, he didn't publish a lot of books like other people, and he didn't get out and do the circuits as much. Like he was before you had the shows. So everybody knows Lefty. He helped you get the shows started. But because he was at all those shows, that's one reason everybody knew who he was. But George was really before that.
Right. He never wanted to hear someone make a suggestion on. Matter of fact, he wanted to write more, but he never did. And when I never told you this. Oh yes, I did. I have that video. I have to give it to you. I made a video actually of George. I was afraid he was going to be gone before anybody did it. This was like a long time ago. So I was before you, believe it or not, with a crummy little camera. Nothing fancy. But anyway, George was great at the show, and he had the audience mesmerized because he never did something that wasn't already experimentally tempted to be perfect with him. When he developed the leader system, I mean, he tells the story when he comes to the shows. It took him almost a year before he actually started to tell people exactly how the leader should be constructed because he had to change it to make sure it was 100% right. He never did anything halfway or 10% way. And that was one of the reasons he didn't enjoy people writing immediately once they got an idea. He was a little bit jealous. It wasn't really jealous. He just didn't like people talking about things that they didn't experiment with more than a couple months or a year, and then finally had it perfect.
Hadn't completely studied it.
Yeah, they'd get an idea and then they'd write about it because they don't think anybody wrote about it. They could make money for an article or sell it to somebody. They didn't care whether they were right or wrong. They just wanted to produce it sometimes.
So you say you've got some old film of him? What's he doing? Casting, tying flies? What's he doing?
Well, he had a real bad intestinal virus that almost put him under the ground. And I thought, I have this new camera. It was called a Betamax. That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was before. I don't know if it was before VHS but they were competing.
I think it was 80s, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was a long time ago. But I thought, I made a couple crazy things with it, just playing around, with the camera, trying to see how it would work. And I thought, George, how about if I do an interview with you and I ask you a lot of questions? And he liked to do that because he wanted to share his story and how he started fly fishing. I have it all on this Betamax tape. It's about an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes. It's a long, long tape.
I got to get that.
Yeah, I wanted you to see it. But, and the other thing that's beside having that complete history of how he started the class at Penn State, it was the first class in the country where you got credit at a major university for taking a fly fishing class. So, and who took it over that he recommended, of course, we're back to Joe Humphreys.
I had no
George
idea
Daniels doing it. So.
I had no idea your Penn State roots were that deep. Like you took George Harvey's original fly fishing class at Penn State, and now 50 years later, you're still going to Penn State games?
Oh, yeah.
You were at one last night.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And he has his room, when he passed away, I don't know if Joe told you this or not. I can't remember. When he passed away, Joe, I guess, got contacted by Bill Skilton, who's the president of the Pennsylvania Fly Fishing Museum. He took George's room piece by piece apart and rebuilt it in the museum. Everything that way George had his room upstairs at his house, one of the bedrooms was his fly tying room. And it's exactly the way it was. I mean, when I walk by it, I expect George to be sitting in front of the table with his old.
I have seen it.
Old
Like
vice. Old vice. What are the bobbins called? The red plastic bobbin. He had like 50 of them on the wall because he didn't want to change the thread. What was that bobbin called?
I can't remember.
But that was like all we used. And the other thing, because I knew him for all those years, what he used for to hold the hackle? A clothespin. Did you know that or
no?
Not? He took a clothespin and whittled it down to a real fine point, and he used that for 40-some years. It's like a collector's item now. People keep asking him, George, do you have any more of those clothespins that you use for hackle pliers?
Wow.
Yeah,
that's in the exhibit at the museum, though, probably.
Oh,
they must have one.
It is, yeah.
It is a beautiful exhibit, and we should give them a plug, the Pennsylvania Fly Fishing Museum.
I stop every time I travel back to where I used to live. Now I live in New Jersey, and I go past Carlisle, and I get off and drive down and look at the museum and then get back on again. And there's a lot of other interesting things there, too, besides George, of course. Barry and Kathy.
Amazing exhibit of bamboo rods. And,
oh, yeah, they just finished it.
Yep.
Yeah, they expanded it. It's amazing. So, but George, he was a tough teacher, but boy, you learned for sure. Sometimes you got embarrassed because, like I said, when he saw my fly line with all the cracks in it, I thought, I should have known better. I should have known. He was my teacher. I should have done something better than that. So then I corrected it. So now I get a lot of fly lines that aren't cracked anymore.
My buddy Joe brings cigars on every fishing trip. So there's one special night where we can sit outside, pour a whiskey, look at the stars, smoke a cigar, and swap fishing stories. We've done it in Patagonia, Mongolia, Bolivia, and all around the world. Joe is obviously a hell of a nice guy. The cigars are just one reason he's invited on every trip. This holiday season, be more like Joe. Give the gift of premium handmade cigars from Cigars International. They have the largest selection, the best prices, and customer service that's second to none. They have free shipping every single day. No minimums, no limits. Just shop, check out, give a great gift. Whether you're shopping for a seasoned aficionado or someone new to cigars, Cigars International makes it easy with expert guides, staff reviews, and advice. Don't forget the accessories and humidors to make your gift unforgettable. Get 20% off your order when you use our code FLYFISH at checkout, or just go to cigarsinternational.com/flyfish and the discount code will automatically apply. The fly fishing show you started as basically a
Trout
weekend,
Masters weekend, yeah.
Trout Master
and then,
weekend with Lefty.
And then Lefty said, well, why don't you do a show, have a casting pond inside, and not just have one celebrity with a dozen or 15 or 20 people together in a room and fishing together. Make an event where you could invite people. And there were enough fly shops, as I started to say earlier, that you could get them to come to the show. And tell them, hey, I'm going to charge you this amount of money, but I think we're going to do something that people are going to be surprised about. And they're going to come and buy things, and you're going to be so surprised that you'll make a lot of money and you'll want to come next year. So I did that the first year with Lefty and George, and I started something that I'm proud of coming up with the idea. There were fly tyers available, but never at a sportsman show. The only fly tyers were at the one I went to that FFF put on. but they only had a couple. And when I started the show and I got Lefty to tell me who people were that were good fly tyers, and I told him George Harvey was coming, he says, he's the best dry fly tyer in the country. No, best dry fly fisherman in the country. Plus, he tied his own flies. So he was happy about that. And then I got a couple other names, and I think we had maybe 12 fly tyers. And I saw what I didn't like at the first show that I was talking about. They had tables that were 8 feet long with 2 chairs, and you split the table. But they were regular tables. So after you watch the fly tyers for a half an hour, you go to the next one and watch them, and then you leave the show and you bend over like the Hunchback of Notre Dame because you're trying to see what they're doing. So I jacked up the tables with PVC pipes and made them up real high, and then I got stools, so everything was chest high, face to face with the tyer and the customer that is asking them questions. And there was another sportsman show in California that used TVs, and it was like a classroom, like a kindergarten classroom. They had about 8 TVs scattered around the room. And the tyer was up in the front, and you couldn't talk to him because you were watching the TVs where he was showing his fly tying. They transported the information to each little TV, and they were sitting there having lunch watching the TV. I said, I don't want that. I want them to be able to yell to the tyer, hey, could you do that wing one more time? I missed that last thing you did. I want to see how you do that again. And they could talk to the tyer. So at the end of the show, it was like, 5 o'clock? And most of the people were starting to leave at that point. The only place that was packed was the fly tyers aisle where I had 15 or so tyers. And I couldn't get them to leave. They were staying at the tables watching the tyers. And guess who I had as the tyers, which I got names from Lefty. Nobody really heard of these guys because they tied in their attics or their basements or an empty room or their garage. Guys that people know now. Bob Klauser, Bob Popovics, Ernie Schwiebert, Gary LaFontaine, Dick Tallure. Let me think a couple others. I think Jack Dennis was there too, because Gary was there. But I didn't know all these people either because you just don't know everybody when you first really love the sport. Eventually, you get to know everybody. And that's one of the best things about running the shows now. I know all these people because I've had them come to support the shows, and I get to be friends with them.
The network grows. You make contact with a couple of them. They introduce you to their friends.
Exactly.
And next thing you know, the fly fishing
and you don't
world's
really
a very
bad,
small spider web.
You don't get bad tips either. Usually they tell you who's good. And you just keep on getting better tyers. And people that you don't know and they don't know who probably learned from watching them and then went home and kept on tying and went crazy because they love tying. Another year or two later, they come to me and show me their flies. I said, would you like to be at one of the tables? So then I changed the progression of people that they don't know to a few new faces, and then they turn into well-known tyers. But that was Bobby Popovics' suggestion. He said, why don't we do now we went from not a sportsman show, but strictly a fly fishing show with the casting, the seminars, and you could take a class too and pay a little extra money for a private class. So now the fall, in November, I did the first fly tying symposium, and it was just fly tyers. And we had probably 35 or 40, which is pretty good. And no casting pond, just fly tying. Renzetti was there, with his vices. And I'm trying to think, we didn't really have any thread people, but we had a lot of people that were pro staffers that represented these companies, as they still do. And that show drew a decent crowd, but it didn't have the crowd that everything had in the spring. There was no casting pond, no casting demonstrations. It was all fly tying. But it went over pretty well. And that's the first tying symposium. And that's both of them, how they first started. And then I just put them together and changed the show, and it got larger immediately because more tires wanted to come, more companies wanted to come when they find out how much money they could make by taking a booth at the shows. And that's how it started at the Seven Springs Resort.
And from there, you just started adding cities across the country and expanding and sort of bringing the fly fishing show to new states.
See, I had already been at the resort for 20 years. I had my leather shop for 42 years there. And I finally closed it after Herman sold the resort to Bob Nutting, who owns the Pirates. I don't know if you knew he did. He bought the resort. And now it's owned by Val Colorado. So all those things happened over the years, but I was gone at that point. I went to Kisa, who was a sales manager that you rent the facility from. She said, Chuck, I didn't get to tell you, I changed your weekend. I had a big carpet cleaning convention that wanted to rent 300 rooms, and they wanted the exhibit hall because they have to spread the carpets out and show how their equipment cleans the carpets, so all these people will buy their equipment and start their own carpet cleaning services. I said, well, what's the weekend, Kiso, that you put me at? She told me the date. I said to her, do you know what weekend that is, Kiso? What do you mean? I said, well, I won't be there, first of all, and neither will anyone else, because it's trout season weekend that opens in Pennsylvania. I did the show the weekend before trout season because everybody wanted to come. They were hungry. They needed all this equipment. They were so anxious for trout season to open. And I said, I can't do it. She said, well, I'll have to give you a different weekend. And how about the only other weekend I have? I think it was the second weekend in May. Well, of course, everybody's going to go fishing then. So the show went from maybe, I think we had 1,000 people the first time I did the show. It went from 1,000 down to like 600 in May. And I thought, well, there's the end of my savings account. I'm almost bankrupt with this show. And then I'm telling you so many things. I can't remember that I experienced all this. It's so long ago. There was another show that popped up. I was the only one that did a show with my own money. And then I heard there was another show in July after I did the first one in April. And I went there, and it was in Carlisle, and it was Barry Serviente. He owned Angling Bookstore. And he did a show that really was like 60% books because he wanted to sell a lot of books and a few exhibitors here and there. And I went to meet him and told him about my show. And I said, why don't you come next year? So I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to do it because I didn't have the date and a lot of people didn't come. He says, well, why don't we just go together? Because where I am in Carlisle, I didn't get a big crowd there either because it's just Cumberland Valley Fly Fishers and a few other clubs. So we found a place together in Somerset, New Jersey, and that's where the whole thing exploded. We had enough money to pay for the exhibitor to set it up, pay for the initial deposits and rental and everything. And we thought, well, if we get 2,500 people, maybe the expense would be covered because it's expensive to do a show. We had 6,500 people. That was the first show. The fire chief was at the door with a policeman, and when people would leave, they'd let people come in. It was like a topless bar or something. I mean, this is a fly fishing show. And guess who was an exhibitor? They had a fly shop then. What did they call it? Barry and Kathy. They had a fly shop.
Oh, yeah?
What was it called in Benton? They were so busy.
That was the one that used to be Barry's dad's.
Yeah. It wasn't that, but they had their own fly shop that they opened after he worked with his dad. And I said, Barry, how you doing? I hate to ask people how they're doing because well, what are you going to do, raise my booth price right away? I said, no. He said, you see that box? I looked, there's a cardboard box on the floor. He said, those are just 50s and 100s. We don't have time to put it in the register. Just throw in the money in them. They had to leave at the end of Saturday and drive back to get more merchandise because they were almost out of merchandise. Wow. It was so crowded. And the other person that came to me at noon on Saturday, the show had only opened at 9 o'clock, Leon Chandler. A lot of people aren't going to know who that is. But he was like, oh, I don't know. Everybody knew him in the fly fishing industry because he was the big deal at Cortland Line Company. Everybody knew Leon. Mm-hmm. And he said, Chuck, I've got to tell you, I do 42 shows a year. They're all sportsman shows. This is the first time I've ever done an all fly fishing show, and I'm out of brochures. I've never been out of brochures in any show I've ever done, and this is noon, and I'm out. And I thought, I think we have something going. And that's how it started right there. And then every year, Barry and I, we became partners 50-50. Every year we would pick another location after we researched it, made sure it was in a populated area. We always found out how Fly Fisherman magazine was sold. I think John might have helped us with that. We'd find out, okay, if we're going to go to Boston, how many people buy Fly Fisherman magazine? Mm-hmm. Or do we want to go to Ithaca, New York, where it's only 20% of the people in Boston that buy it? So we went to places that were populated with people that love fly fishing. Barry would pick one place one year, I'd pick another, then he'd pick one. And if we had a bad show, that would go off our list. Or we didn't get the right dates. Sometimes we wanted to do a show in two places, but it happened to be the only weekend that was available. So one of them had to be eliminated. So we did shows all over the country. I mean, Texas, we did Chicago. We never wanted to do shows in the Southeast because there was a shallow water expo. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And that was more boats and more salt water. And the shows we did were primarily freshwater experiences, not just trout, but bass, walleyes, pike, muskie. Muskie wasn't that popular 15, 20 years ago when we were in the middle of our show season. Now everybody wants to try fishing for muskies.
Or at least hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or do it even if they don't catch them. If they get one next to the boat, that's a success. They're happy about it. And the flies, look how the fly tying's changed. I mean, when they tied flies at the shows I started, 12 was like a big fly. Now, 7, 8, 9 inches, or 3 articulated flies.
Bob Popovics kind of started that, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I remember the first going to the shows and seeing him tie like some of those original hollow flies and beast flies, and it's just like,
and he started with,
where's he even getting tails this big? Yeah.
And I used to tease him. I said, Bob, where do you get your fly tying materials? At Ace Hardware? He always has the right glue and the right consistency. And he was very similar to George, that he would try things until he had them perfect, and then people would see them, and they might look at them in the beginning and say, that's kind of stupid looking. And now they say, wow, that's just the same. That looks like a live minnow. He said, yeah, I watch. And I used to build little ponds in a little crate for him to pull the flies through. And he would put his articulated flies in when he first started them and watch it swim like crazy. As soon as they see it, say, where can I get those? How do I learn how to tie those?
So you live in New Jersey. You must have fished with Popovics
quite
a few times, huh?
Yeah. I went up right in the beginning of the shows, and I don't know when it was. It could have been the second or third show. We decided to take a little trip after the show in the spring. It was Andy Renzetti, Bobby Popovics, and Phil Camera, and me. And which, talk about coincidences in fly fishing. You know where my son lives now? In Gunnison, Colorado. We went to the Taylor River, which is a big fly fishing only river that has giant fish. And I'll never forget, Bobby Popovics had his, what did he call it? The lip fly with the lip. He took the silicone, put a lip on it, and it looked like a repeller. Anyway, the silicone, that's what he called it.
Silicone, yep.
Yeah. And I didn't want to say anything to him, but he wanted to try it in this water with 23 or 4-inch trout. All these trout ate were Macy shrimp or whatever, Macy, I believe. That's all they ate. They're like size 20 to 22. And he's got this 5-inch rappel on. Nothing looked at it. I didn't want to say anything to Bobby because it was a beautiful fly. But there's no way he's going to get a fish on it. But Bobby, he was a lot of fun. He always had some new idea. He would go right down to the blitzes at the beach because he only lived a block and a half. People would call him on the phone. He'd get down with his camera and he'd film the bait fish and net them. And he'd take them back. And when he made flies out of material, they looked just like a real bait fish. They were perfect. And then he started to incorporate not only the looks and the size and the color, but the movement. So now he had not only the right size for the bait at that time, because 3-inch fish would come in one time, a month later he'd be catching 6-inch bait fish. So he used different flies at different months. Just like, trout fishermen use the different kinds of dry flies for the hatches.
Yeah, he revolutionized saltwater fly tying, that's for sure. The surf candy, silicone, beast flies, hollow flies, everything.
The other guy that joined us that found out from Phil Camera, I don't know if you knew Phil Camera very well, but he had the first book on synthetic tying, synthetic flies.
I didn't know him.
Yeah, a long, long time ago. And he had a company called Larvalase. He invented the Larvalase product, the synthetic vinyl.
I know Larvalase.
So who wanted to join us to find out was there but George Gerke? You don't know that name, I bet.
I do so.
You do?
The gink guy.
Exactly, Gerke's Geek. And he came to my first show at Seven Springs, too. I forgot to mention that. The phone rang at 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife picks it up, and she listens to it, and moo, the cows are up. Here, it must be some fly tire, It was George Gerke. He flew in his own plane from Montana and landed at the airport we had at Seven Springs because the owners of Seven Springs had small planes. They built an airport with no lights. I don't know how he landed. He landed at 2:33 in the morning. The airport was closed. He calls me up and says, "Can you come up to this airport? There's no one to pick me up. There's no lights. There's no phone." I had to get up and go pick him up at the airport. He came to the show. And at the end of the show, I took him back up to his plane. He said, "Do you have a screwdriver in your truck?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "I needed to jump my engine."
On his plane?
He jumped the engine. "Okay, I got it. See you. I'll give you a call when I get to Montana," and off he went. If you didn't know George Gerke, that's just one of the stories I could think of.
The creative mind that brought us the original gink. That's the very first fly floating, right? There was nothing like it before then.
He had the zinc, which made your fly sink, or the gink that made it float. And he came to my show, and I didn't know this, but he doesn't pay until he arrives and has his booth set up. And you know how I found that out? Because I talked to Silvio Calabi that started the show for a few years when he saw ours and everything. He used to wait for George to come and say, "George, I don't know whether I'm going to give you space. You never sent your contract." So he gave him a $1,000 bill. That's how he paid. He walked in the door, gave him a $1,000 bill, and then he got the table in the booth. But you can't run a show
ahead.
when the hotel wants half the money 6 months before your show. Well, we'll give you the money as soon as George Gerke shows up. I'll have a $100 bill from him at least.
Whole chain of IOUs. This episode is supported by TechStream, high-tech fly tying materials made in Italy and trusted by the best tyers in the world. Techstream sounds new to many anglers. That's because it's re-entering the U.S. and Canada this year through Mayfly Outdoors, the parent company of Ross, Able, Airflow, Airlight, Renzetti, and Dynaking. But globally, tyers have relied on these materials for nearly 2 decades. If you care about clean wraps, true colors, and materials that behave the same every time you sit down at the vise, Techstream delivers. Their threads, dubbing, chenilles, and specialty fibers make tying easier, more predictable, and more enjoyable. Look for Techstream in fly shops across the U.S. and Canada and level up your fly tying game. So one of the stories I wanted to get you to recount was the roasting of Lefty Kreh.
Oh.
I was not there, but
And
I've
guess
heard
what?
about
I
this.
forgot that too. Besides Harvey's tape, I have the George Harvey roast. Remember?
There's a George Harvey roast too.
I don't mean George Harvey. I mean Lefty Kreh roast. I told you I have to show that to you.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're going to do with it. Sometimes I'm embarrassed because a roast can be not acceptable by the roastee, the person getting roasted. Lefty came up and did like 3 or 4 jokes. We had a barbecue at Seven Springs on Saturday night after the show was closed. That's what I did the first show. Mm-hmm. And Lefty was telling his jokes, and they were so funny. Everyone was laughing. And all of a sudden, back at the audience, this lady comes in dressed up like a bag lady, pushing a cart. Bernard, where were you, honey? I was at the motel waiting for you, and you never came. What the heck happened? You were gonna finish that experiment you were doing on that book you were writing about tying knots. You left me tied to the bed in all kinds of knots. How was I gonna get out of my bed? And that was just the beginning. That went on for almost 40 minutes. Lefty sat in a chair, and she came around and just roasted him to death. And I'll make the story real short. I thought maybe he was going to be mad, but she hugged him, he hugged her at the end, and the audience was crazy.
Complete surprise to Lefty. He did not know he was going to get roasted.
I kept everything a secret because I talked to this lady that I hired and told her all the stories that I knew about Lefty. And he was thinking, how does she know this stuff? Who is this person? And then Clauser was there, and he must have taken a couple dozen pictures with the camera, and you could hear him howling and laughing in the audience. So I called Lefty like 2 days after he got home. I said, Lefty, it's Chuck Furimsky. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't embarrass you with that roast, but I think a lot of people liked it. He said, well, I'll tell you what. I'm thinking, oh boy, here it comes. I showed that tape to Evelyn, his wife. She never laughed so hard in her life. She said it was the funniest thing she ever saw. And I thought, whew, wow.
Everybody's usually, always praising Lefty and sucking up to him and stuff. She probably loved seeing him getting roasted for once.
That was successful for him.
And you're going to have to share that with me. I would love to see it.
And you know who made the video with the camera? My son, Ben.
Did he really?
Yeah. And the only thing is, it was so loud from people laughing and the girl roasting him. There was one little section in there that the volume, you're perfect with the volume and everything here, but, those early cameras, if you didn't have it right. But it didn't matter. I mean, you laughed so hard, you didn't even have to hear some of the things she said. But the good things you'll hear, and I have that. I'm going to promise. Now that you're recording me, I have to give it to you.
You have to come through so we can show.
Yeah, you're gonna. And the other thing that I did with George, I did mention that after he finished the interview of all the history of starting the fly fishing class at Penn State, I said, George, this is great, but there's only one thing we didn't see you do. You haven't tied the fly. Well, let's go upstairs and tie one. And then I do a whole section of about 20 minutes with him tying a green drake. Whoa. Of all the flies. And he tied it exactly like he's always tied it. Wait till you see that. He used a clothespin for the hackle and everything.
I love it. I did not know about the clothespin at all.
I always went up to his fly tying room because he always had a new idea. I remember coming in one time after fishing. He wanted me to stop by like 4 or 5 o'clock and give him a fishing report because he didn't fish a lot. He'd fish at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, catch 7 or 8 20-inch trout at the Spruce Creek Rod and Gun Club where he was a hero, and then come home. He didn't have to fish all day. So I came in the door, and his wife had passed away a few years before that, and he had a housekeeper. She was from the Philippines. Mr. Harvey, I have some mail for you. I have a very important letter. She hands him all this mail, and he looks at it. Do you see the letter, Mr. Harvey? It's from President Carter. Yeah, okay. And he threw it on the floor. Let's go upstairs. I want to show you that new wing I'm putting on the wet fly. I said, George, you just threw the president's letter on the floor. I'll read it later. So you knew the fly tie was important when he threw the president's letter on the floor. And you know, he went fishing with Jimmy Carter. You know about that many times.
Yeah, I assume so, because they're both fishing Spruce Creek. They both know Wayne Harpster, obviously, so
exactly.
I just make the connection there.
Yeah.
I know that Jimmy Carter fished the Green Drake hatch on Spruce Creek every year for 30 years.
The hatch that George talked about in the video that I made of him, because I don't know, I guess I shouldn't have said, I said, who's a better fisherman, George, Evelyn or President Carter? Well, Evelyn stood, and he told me where she stood, where the tractors were coming. This was like in August. She caught 21 trout in a half an hour. So I think she's a better fisherman. Carter's pretty good, but his wife was much better. George didn't care if
Didn't pull any punches,
or not. So he told it the way it was all the time.
A bunch of legends.
Well, of course, we don't want to be real sad because we had enough things to make us sad in the last couple of years. But the only thing with me doing the shows, and what was it now, 35 years, and, I turned them over to my son, and I didn't realize how long it's been since he took them over, and I didn't realize that he got the shows when COVID came in. The next year, he had to cancel all the shows. I said, aren't you glad you have a good father that gave you a tremendous business now that it's closed forever? Well, the next year after the COVID was over, the show exploded again, and it's been busy ever since. He's done a much better job than me because you talked about Yvonne Chenard. Do I have the name right? From Patagonia?
Yeah, Yvonne Chouinard.
That's what I thought. And there was the other guy. Who's the guy that owns Virgin Airlines?
Virgin Airlines.
You know, we couldn't think of it. We were thinking about that the other day. But the point is, they did all their shows with a pencil and a paper notepad. I don't know if you know that. They didn't use computers. They might not have been invented then. But that's how I did all the shows. And the girls in the office that worked, a couple of the girls that were real good that worked for Barry and me, they did all the typing and everything. Because I used to be real good at typing, but then when I left college, I didn't type at all. And Ben now, I mean, all the electronics that they have now, whoever uses a pencil? I joke with people that know that I did all the shows with a pencil and paper. I said, yeah, but you know what? I found out that there's a ballpoint pen. You push the top and it comes out of the bottom and it's ink. And you can use a ballpoint pen. You don't have to break your pencil point and have to sharpen it all the time. Joking with them. But Ben's doing a great job because he has the electronics that he knows how to work. I could do my cell phone, but usually I send a message and they say, the picture didn't come. Why didn't you send a picture? I don't know. I didn't know which button to push.
Well, pencil and paper got the job done to get those shows started and bring fly fishers together, and it really started a movement. I love going to them. Just you see so many friends and colleagues there, and get exposed to new ideas, and just being in a room that's full of people who sort of think the same way
connected.
You do.
It's all about the connection and the marketing. I don't know how many, but there were at least maybe close to half a dozen marriages and maybe one or two divorces from those marriages, but they met at the shows, and they got married because they connected because they were both fly fishing people.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years Barry and Kathy were married. I don't know. A long time. A long time. When I first
got to be 35 or 40.
Yeah, when I met them in Yellowstone Park that time, and they gave me Lefty's phone number, Kathy was, I mean, she looked like a cute teenager her whole life. She never changed, and she looked like that. And I didn't know whether I was talking to Barry and his daughter or Barry and his wife. She was, and at that time she had Barry was probably 40. She was probably 32 or 33 or something. I don't know.
Well, when you see Barry tomorrow, say hi
ask
for
him.
me.
And he did the shows too, but of course, after he started going on all these trips and being such a good host with Kathy and a hostess with her from Frontiers, Mike Fitzgerald, I knew. He did our shows. Mm-hmm. He would do a show and book like a third of his season from people he met at the shows. And of course, Barry and Kathy went as the people that were in charge of the group that signed up for the shows. So I got to see them a lot because I would go on a couple of their shows. And Barry, my partner, we had a good deal. We're going to give a free booth to a lodge that we want to both decide on going to. And we, instead of us having to pay the $3,000 or $4,000 at that time, whatever, we'll trade them the booths at the shows, and we'll go together as partners, and we won't have to buy the trip. They'll give them free booths at the shows.
Hey, you're in it for the fly fishing.
So we did that for years and years.
Got to see some great places. Well, thank you for coming in. It was a pleasure.
Well, I talked more than I wanted to. I was thinking, you're sitting there ready to ask a question, and I'm still talking. So I'm sorry about that.
Nothing to be sorry for. It was great. I learned so much.
Yeah.
Loved hearing about it.
Well,
appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity, but my son is going to probably support me, I hope, of what I said. But he doesn't remember it all because he was working as a teenager, getting the coffee and everything.
Yeah, he was Tiki's age.
Now he's a big cheese, and I have to get the coffee for him.
Thanks for coming in.
All right, thanks very much.
Well,
George, it's homecoming weekend here in 1985. We're at Penn State, and I stopped over to see my friend George Harvey, and also an ex-teacher of mine. I'm trying to remember what year you were my teacher. I think it was 1962. So it's been over 20 years, George. We go back quite a number of years, and I want to just ask you a few questions about your years at Penn State. Your actual position was what at Penn State when you were here?
Well, I was an associate professor in charge of the men's required physical education for the last 17 years, and before that I worked as an instructor and assistant professor and gradually moved up to the associate professor and head of the Department of Required Physical Education for men, and that was one of the biggest programs in our college. In fact, one of the biggest programs in the university at the time.
Well,
we averaged about 4,500 students every term or every semester.
Well, I know when I was here, there were a lot of phys ed choices on the program, but the one that I had my sights on was fly tying by George Harvey. Now, I took the course, and I can't say I was a bad student. I can't say I was your best student, but I had a great time. And I know I wasn't the only person in that class. How many students do you think you taught over the years, and how long did the course exist, and does it still exist? Can you give me some facts on all that?
Well, I started I taught the first course back in 1934 when I was still a student, and it was actually the dean of the College of Agriculture, R.L. Watts. I had taught him to tie flies and to do some fly fishing, and he asked me if I would teach a course in fly tying and casting and fishing and lecture on it. And I said yes. This was when I was a student, and from that time on, the courses have been taught. Now, in 1935, I was hired by the College of Agriculture to teach in the forestry school and take charge of their physical education program. I taught all sports there, and I continued to teach fly tying. In fact, it was so popular in the forestry school that we almost had to cut it out because all the students were taking it in tying flies and not studying. So then when I come back on the campus in 1942, started the classes again, as these were extracurricular classes without credit. And in 1948, the demand was so great and so many people wanted to take these courses that we put it in for credit in the College of Health and Physical Education. It was first a true 2-credit course, 3 hours a week. And immediately it was a success. I taught 5 sections at first. At one time, I taught 7 sections a week, and then I had to cut it down because it was just too much. Because it was an extension course that I had to travel around the state and teach, and that was very popular. So I had to try to, in other words, in order to teach the greatest number of people throughout Pennsylvania, I had to teach on the campus and also on extension work. And over the years, I had, in all my angling classes, I had over 35,000 that I had in class. I taught, in addition to teaching all the time, from that time on until I retired, from 1948 until 1972, I taught, always had classes on the campus. And during the 50s, for about 9 years, I taught extension classes, and I taught classes in 72 different cities in Pennsylvania. These classes went on for 5 weeks, 3-hour period a night, once a week for 5 weeks. Some of the cities I was back and had as many as 2 and 3 classes in succeeding years. So it was very popular, and it still would be today, but I know I could go out today and start and teach classes every day of the year, but it's just too much. When I retired, I decided to give it up, but I figured I'd paid my dues as far as the angling was concerned, and the people that I taught are now teaching other people, so it's being carried on. And when I retired, I hired Joe Humphreys a couple of years before and took him under my wing and taught him to tie flies, and he took lecture notes, and I gave him all of mine, and he's continued with the classes, but they're not teaching near as many now as we used to. He'll have maybe a couple a semester, maybe 3 or 4 a year at the most, and we used to run 14 classes on the campus during the semester, and then during the term we taught. I had to cut down because I was head of the department at that time. I could only teach 2 classes every term, so that was that would cut down to 6 classes a week.
So you had probably 35,000 students, did you say?
Over 35,000.
Well,
that's
counting me, right?
That's counting you.
All right. I was one of them in there somewhere. So now you've been retired for how many years, George?
I've been retired since 1972. I retired.
Boy, it doesn't seem like it's been over 5 years to me. I don't know. It's just.
Well, it don't seem like it's been any longer than that to me, but because I've been fishing. In fact, it seems to me I'm busier now than I was before when I was working.
I wanted to ask you how many flies that you think you may have tied in your lifetime, and do you still tie on a regular basis, even though that you're retired? Do you tie more or less, or?
I don't tie as many as I used to, but I still probably tie a couple hundred dozen a year. It's relaxing and a hobby, and when I get up in the mornings, I usually go over to fly tying room and maybe tie anywhere from 3 or 4 to sometimes a dozen. And in days when I can't get out to go fishing, when the weather's bad, I might tie as many as a couple dozen. And then when I go to Florida in the winter, I take my fly tying material along, and I tie flies there. I have been tying flies. I don't like to say this, but I have been tying flies for 64 years, and I probably average about 300 dozen a year for 64 years. So you can figure out how many.
I can't figure it out. I'm in that age where you have to figure things out on a calculator. You can't use your head. You need a calculator. Well, I don't think I've ever seen that many flies in my lifetime. So.
Well, I've tied more flies in a year. The most I ever tied was 800 dozen, but that's more flies than most fly tiers will tie in a lifetime.
I've seen you tie a lot of flies myself, and I know that you don't rush your tying techniques. Everything you do is perfected, and if there's one slight hair or hackle that's misplaced, it's no good to you. So I can't imagine tying that many flies and being a perfectionist like that, right? Well, you're not counting the ones that you just kind of put together, but you're not like that. You always have them perfect. When they're finished, they're the best fly of its kind. I'm just saying that myself. You don't have to try to brag and agree with that, but you know that's true.
Well, if you don't take pride in your work, I don't think you get the personal satisfaction out of it. I could tie flies a couple dozen an hour and slam them together, but I think that's the reason now that the flies are becoming collector's items, because not being egotistical, but I do have a reputation of tying one of the best dry flies in the country. And when I sell any flies to somebody for shadow boxes or collectors, I want them, when anybody else sees them, that they feel the same way as I do about them, that they're exceptional flies.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the main ingredient in a good fly is the material, and I have always had access to the best material available, even back in the 30s and 40s and through the 50s. I at one time was the director of the Phillips Fly and Tackle Company, and we would get necks in from China, and I would get down and sort out the necks in different grades. We'd get maybe 4,000 or 5,000 necks in at a time, and I would get down and sort the necks out, and when I come to an exceptionally good one, I'd throw that off to the side, and that's why...
That was for me, huh?
Yeah, that was an exceptional hackle, and not many people could have ever had the hackle available to them to tie flies that I had at that time and that I have today.
Well, talking about the materials, it reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you, and I asked you before, but you can just give me a little bit of a brief history on it again. I know that you had a lot to do with the creation of the final results of the Mets line of quality hackle. I know you were involved in that with Bucky, and I know it's probably the most well-known hackle available today and the best quality. Can you go back and tell me how that kind of started out with you?
Well, I was responsible for... Bucky wouldn't have been in the hackle business now, I'm sure, if it hadn't been for me. I had, through another friend of mine, I had met Andy Miner out in St. Paul, Minnesota. And he corresponded with me and wanted me to come out, see him. Well, I got out there, and I had to sit at the fly tying desk for a couple days to show him everything that I knew about it. And he had been tying flies for years, but I had different techniques that he wanted to learn. Finally, one time I approached him and I said, how about some of the eggs for your birds? And I said, I have a friend that raises chickens, and I can get him to raise these birds, and so we'd have enough to tie our own flies. And he was the only one that I knew that raised blue dun birds besides Darby up on the Beaver Kill. And So finally he agreed to give me 12 dozen eggs. And I took Bucky out, and Bucky didn't know the man or knew anything about him. And I took him out, and I got the eggs, and I gave them to Bucky to raise, and that's how the bird started.
Well, what kind of amount of necks does he produce today on his birds? Do you have any? I know he really has a lot out there in the market.
He's captured the world market, and he has done a lot of his breeding of the birds. He has improved the hackle probably 75% over what it was when Andy Miner had it. I mean, the quality of hackle. And the male birds, just counting the male birds alone, he capes out, and this year he will sell over 60,000. They're not cheap. They retail at around $49.50 a piece for the first grade. There's 3 grades of them. The lowest grade is around $30, and so it's turned out to be a pretty good business. I just wish I had a chunk of it myself now.
Well, I think you have a lot more than money can buy with the knowledge that you have on trout fishing and fly tying. That's another thing I meant to ask you. I'm going to ask you now. When you were I was going to say my age. I still consider myself young. But when you were a young man, how did you learn the things that people are learning today by listening to things that the experts tell them and reading magazines and watching films and taking instruction like I did from you? Who was your teacher, and how did you pick up everything?
I never had anybody that teach me anything about fly tying. I picked it all up myself. I never had a book until I don't believe I had a book on fly tying until after I was out of college and teaching the course. I learned it by the first fly, actually, that I tied. I took and tore apart an English wet fly, and I thought the hackle on the fly was hair, and I had little hooks, and I was trying to tie hair on. In fact, I cut hair off our cat and off the dog and tried to tie it on, but I couldn't make it stick out. And finally, my father had a few old flies, and I took one of them, took it apart, and I found out it was a chicken feather. And my uncle was in the meat business, had a butcher shop, and he used to dress all his own chickens. Well, as soon as I found out it was hackle, I went down on Thursdays. He used to dress the birds out for the weekend, and I'd go down and we'd cut the heads off, and I kept all the heads off all the chickens and skimmed the hackle out, or skimmed the neck out, and that's how I got the first hackle as far as flies were concerned. But as far as fishing is concerned, I never had anybody really teach me anything about it. It was just something that I picked up over the years. And
well, let me put you on the spot. Do you think you learn anything when you go out now, or do you think you know it all?
If I thought I knew everything about it now, I'd quit fishing.
Well, I told you before, one of the most frustrating things for me is I really like to learn as much as I can. And when I come and visit you and find out how little I know, because every time I come here I learn new things, I guess I have to just continue to improve. Just throw me a little bit of knowledge every time. That's all I ask.
Well, I'll tell you, some people have eyes and they can't see. Some people have brains in their head and they don't use them. And anybody that goes out on a stream and doesn't learn something every day he's out, there's something wrong. And actually, most fishermen that I have seen that have fished for a number of years, I'd say 95% of them, they think that they've had these many years of experience. And all they've actually had is the first year's experience repeated over and over and over, and they never seem to ever improve. So if you don't try to improve every time you're out, you never can really reap the satisfaction that you would get if you do become more proficient.
Well, could you give me, just for the record, a couple of suggestions on, for instance, tackle and approaching the stream? I know it's difficult just to say what kind of flies you would use, but I know you have a few top favorite flies. Just mention that and tell me what things most people make mistakes in when they're approaching streams and the tackle that they use, and what are a couple good suggestions on how to really improve your fishing?
Well, I would say number one, that you've got, before you can become a proficient fly fisherman, you've got to first learn to cast. And I had to learn the hard way, and it took me a long time. But the quickest way you can learn to cast is to hire some good caster, and there's a lot of excellent casters today. That Lefty Kreh is one of the best. He's probably taught more people to cast than anybody else in the country. But to get a good instructor and let him teach you. Now, he can't teach you to fish, but unless you can cast well enough to present the fly the way it should be presented, you're never going to learn. I know people that have fished all their life, and they can't cast as good as a 3-year-old can cast if you take them out and give them the proper instruction. After that, you should have good balanced equipment, and it does not have to be expensive. You can buy equipment, a good rod, reel, and line, even at today's high prices for less than $100, and you can catch as many fish with that type of an outfit as you can if you paid $1,000 for the same thing. I mean, the rod, reel, and line. Then after that, the most important part of your equipment, as far as I'm concerned, when you're fishing a dry fly, is the leader. And you've got to have the leader built so that you can cast slack into the terminal end of the leader. So when it falls on the water, it falls in a series of S curves. So this allows the fly to float down naturally by the time the current pulls those S's out of the leader and straightens it out. And for dry fly fishing, anybody that learns that cannot fail to catch trout. That is by far the most important. With wet fly fishing, streamers or bucktails or nymph fishing, this is not important. However, when you're fishing a wet fly upstream, I still try to cast it so that I get a good slack leader in it. But when you're fishing streamers or bucktails or anything down, you're going to have drag doesn't important because you're fishing these flies underneath the surface. Then, of course, you need a selection of flies. I can fish any place all over the United States with less than 10 flies. And if I had to select 10, I'd take these sizes in size from 10 down to size 20. I would pick the Adams, the Gordon Quill, the Sulphur, the light Cahill, the dark Cahill, the ginger quill, and then I would take a stonefly nymph. I'd take 3 colors of nymph: the black, one with a yellow body, and one of brownish colored nymph. And with those flies right there, and one more,
Wait,
the
let
deer
me take
hair
a
ant.
guess. You got me.
The deer hair ant. And with those flies, you could fish any place in the United States and take trout.
I was waiting for that deer hair, and you
Yeah.
saved the best to last because I know my son saw you tie those, and he went home and tied about a dozen. Unfortunately, the next day he had school, and I took 3 of them, and I went out in the stream, and I caught about 10 trout on them. They get torn up pretty good, but just like you mentioned, the rattier they get, the more chewed up they get, they seem to work just as well. The trout take them anyway.
Sometimes work better when they're all...
Well, I'll tell you, I would like to try to see if we can film a little bit up in your fly tying room. I know I've been up there a lot, and I'm fortunate in that respect, and there's people that probably never will see it. And just to see you tie a few of these flies on film would be a real satisfying treat for me and anybody else that sees this. Do you think we could take a walk up there and look around
I think
for a few
you can.
minutes?
If you get that fly tying room, it's the only one in the country. People have been here from all over the United States, and they all tell me they've never seen a setup for fly tying like I have. So it's a result of collecting material for, as I said, 64 years. I hate to tell you that again, but that's how long I've been collecting material, and I have some of it up there that's probably material that's over 60 years old now.
Well, I'll shut this camera off. We'll take a walk upstairs, and I'll have to set up a few light bulbs. We'll see if we can get it on film.
Okay.
Well, we're inside the house, and George is looking over a wall filled with some memorable photographs of his years of. I see a familiar face right there at the top. I remember I asked you what you thought of our president, Jimmy Carter, and you said that he was a darn good fisherman, but you aren't going to give me any comment on whether you would support him politically or not, but he was a good fisherman.
I have voted for him every time. I'd vote for him again. I wish he would run right now. I'd sooner see him. If he was the president now, I don't think we'd have some of the problems that we have today.
Well,
And he's a real good fisherman, and so is Rosalynn Carter. In fact, about 6 weeks ago, I spent a morning with Rosalynn Carter and helping her get back again to where she was a few years ago. And she stood in one place after I got her leader adjusted right and caught 19 trout and never moved.
Huh.
In fact, she beat Jimmy that morning.
really?
And he only caught 10. So she was really happy. And that's a picture of her there, that little one on the wall.
Can you go over and just point out a few of the...
This is a 22-inch trout that she caught.
Oh, okay.
That's a native fish. Here's a little wooden thing with my name on it. Jimmy Carter made for me. It has flies.
I remember seeing that when you received it, because you know I'm into the leather business, and I saw that letter, and you said Jimmy was involved in. All right, now that's I'm shooting in on Lefty.
Yeah, here's Lefty Kreh. He's one of the best casters I know of, and he's a great teacher. And
next to that, you have Jimmy over on the other side of the room, which we'll film in a few minutes at your fly tying bench.
They're sitting there. That's the Carter family there.
Now down, I'm looking at Joe Humphreys watching you.
Yeah, well, that's a big trout. I located that trout. I found it. I was going to get back and catch it, but I was afraid to fish at night for fear I'd fall. So I took Joe up and showed him where it was. And
what was the size? I know that's the state record in brown.
I forget. It's about 32 inches or 3 inches long and weighed, I think, 15 pounds, 6 ounces, or 16 pounds.
What did he catch it on? That's what I'm...
Got it on a big night fly.
Night fly?
Yeah.
Who tied it?
Well, he tied it. I showed him. I showed him how to tie it.
It's the fly with the curled out
That's right.
wings, the Harvey night fly.
That's right.
You didn't want to say it, but I knew what it was.
It was a fly.
Let's see, what else do you have? I saw...
Well, here's this picture over here of the trout on. Somebody gave that to Rosalynn Carter when we were fishing out in West Yellowstone. They were out with my wife and I, spent a week with us in West Yellowstone, and somebody brought that up and gave it to her, and they were on the way to China, and so she gave it to me. So I kind of have that hanging up there too. But
well, there's a lot of awards up here, and I know you could talk all day on what you could remember when you look at these pictures, because they say what, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'd like to see you tie a few flies, so maybe we'll move over and get you tying a few flies for us, okay? Well, on the other side of the wall, the other side of George's room, you can see the organization here of all his materials for fly tying. I'm just shooting around here, George, before I ask you any questions. I'm shooting on the wall with all your bobbins and your desk, your scrap catcher, and what I'm looking at now are boxes that are all labeled, and every one of those boxes contains what's written on the outside. I'm looking at a number 16 Caddis, Cahill, Gordon Quill, all the different patterns you have organized in your boxes. More materials. Those are glass jars. Do you put mothballs inside the jars at all, George?
No, you don't have to.
You don't have to.
As long as they don't have any moths in to start with, and I've never had a moth in any of my fly tying material and since I've been 10 years old, so I have never had a problem at all. But I do keep some mothballs in some of these larger drawers, but I don't really believe it's necessary. These are all full of flies over here too. They're just a box full. You might see, you know what that fly is.
Yeah.
That's the green drake.
That's
These are all full of flies over here, all different kinds.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, there's another president here I see. You were saying how many years you've been tying flies. Well, you've gone through a couple presidents too. There's a different one on the wall. It's not Carter, but it's Eisenhower. That was the first president you really took out fishing, wasn't it? Or not?
Well, I only took 2 out, and he's that was in 1952. That's Milton Eisenhower. He was president of the university at the time, and he liked to fish. And in fact, he had called me out of class to take him fishing, and sometimes I really didn't like that, but I had no choice in the matter. And then when before Ike Eisenhower was president, after Milton was here, he sent some flies down to him, and after that, he got me to tie all of his flies, and I tied flies for both Milton and Ike for many years.
Was Ike a pretty good fisherman?
Ike was an excellent fisherman. Milton had never fished fly very much, but he got so that he was fair.
Mm-hmm.
And but he liked to. The thing I couldn't break him from. He always wanted to get big fish to bring back home, and I liked to release them, and I wanted to kill the big ones. But he wanted to bring the big trout home all the time, and he did bring some tremendous fish back. But there's a lot of fond memories going back.
I'm looking behind you as I photographed, and there's a young lady up there tying a fly. Who's that young lady?
Well, that was my daughter. She was tying wing dry flies and wet flies when she was 3 years old. And that picture was taken by Life magazine photographers when they did come down here and did a 3-page spread on this fly tying back in the early 50s.
I thought women were just supposed to have babies and cook and wash dishes. I always get in trouble when I say that with my wife. My wife is not a fisherman, but my son is, and I wish she fished a little bit more. But she's nice enough to let me use my time up to fish, because I told her when we got married that fishing was going to be number 1 and she was going to be number 2, and she seemed to accept that. Not easily, but she still accepts it. When I want to fish, she lets me go.
Well, I'm glad that I have a chance to come back now. You said your wife wasn't a fisherman. Well, I'm glad she wasn't a fisherman, because
Fisherwoman.
you'd have a hard time having.
Well, wouldn't have a son to fish with, right?
Fisherette.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to shut this off, and we're going to get down to some serious tying. All right.
Okay.
George, we're at your bench. You're ready to give us what we really want to find out. This is what the ultimate test is on fishing, is to present it with a fly that you've made yourself and catch fish. So what are you going to tie for us?
Well, we'll tie one of the most enjoyable hatches to fish here in Pennsylvania, not only here, but any place where the green drake, that's Ephemerella gutulata, the scientific name, and it's found all over the East, and you have some of the subspecies or other species that are found out in the West. I've fished green drake hatches out on the Madison River. Now, this first material for tail, I like it. That's a skunk tail. I like it because it's good and stiff fibers, and it'll support the fly up, and you try to take and even up the ends here a little bit so that they're the right consistency. Then you take, and here's one of the important things in fly tying. Take, when you grasp anything, have the tips of your fingers together so that you can open them up like that with a V and then close them so that you can hold that material tight when you tie it in. Now I squeeze it tight, and I just take and tie it in until I have it. Then I run the tying thread back to the bend of the hook, and I hold the tail to keep it perfect so that it's set right on top. Then I bring the thread up to the front, a little more than a fourth of the distance back from the eye of the hook, and then I take, this is part of a calf tail. This is the yellow from a calf tail that's dyed fluorescent, for this fly has a light colored wing. And we take it, hold it the same way as we did the tail, take and tie it in up here at the front, take it up, turn it around, and once you get used to it, you can whip that around there pretty fast. You've got to notice how I hold the bobbin with the thumb on the thread so that I can take it up or release it as I want to. Never hold the bobbin in your hand like this. Hold it out here at the end, because you see how fast I can move and tie when it's out near the end. If I have it in my hand, I got to take the whole hand around, which cuts down and on your speed, and also if you hold it in your hand, you'll break a lot of thread. Then you just take and separate the wings. Now, I've tied so many flies that I don't have to take and look very much. I just feel it, and I know that I have about the same number of fibers on each side. I go around a figure eight around both sides till I have them set up at the right angle. And then what I do, I always take a solution here that's made from shoe glue and toluene, and I cut it down the consistency of lacquer. I don't use lacquer anymore at all. I take a piece of yarn here, and a lot of people take and tie the whole thing. So I get a neater fly. I take and separate the fibers so I only have 2 strands, and then I start winding. You notice if I'm winding from the left to right, I take it over the top with the right hand, pick it up underneath with the left, and keep each right wrap tight against the preceding one till I get up here, and I leave a little space about 1/16 of an inch back of the wings, and I take and put another little drop. I want the flies secured so they're never going to come apart. This is much better than lacquer because it's actually a rubber solution. Now I'm going to take 2 hackle here, and I'm going to leave the one. The stem or the quill of the hackle of this one is a little longer than the other. That's going to be the one that I wrap last. Now here's a new trick that I just found out. You asked me if I ever learned anything new. I've been tying flies for 60 years, and I just found out the other day, fooling around here, that if I take and pull a hackle out and hold it to the front like that, then I won't get near as many fibers of the hackle sticking out. Then I take the hackle and start there to wind. Now I've had a lot of people ask me about this. This is a clothespin. When I started tying flies over 60 years ago, I didn't have enough money to buy a hackle pliers, so I made them out of wooden clothespin. And this hackle plier here is probably 55 or 60 years old. I've had so many people come in here to see them, and they always ask me for a pair of them. I used to have dozens of them. I think the only ones that has any of the original ones, Lefty Kreh and Joe Humphreys, I gave them one of the originals. And then I take this second hackle and pull the fibers forward, take enough turns around behind to keep the fibers. And you want the fibers to stand out so they're perpendicular to the shank of the hook. And then you take and hold the wings back and wind everything right up close to the front. And then we take and finish it off. Keep everything up tight. Now there's something that a lot of people would get all shook up if they happened. The reason why I cut that off is because I have a little eye problem and I can't see very well. As you can see, I didn't see where that thread was. I was just guessing. But I've tied so many flies that I can almost tie them without looking. And I did get 1 or 2 fibers left. So there's what the finished fly looks like. And you see, it's not too bad for somebody that's half blind.
Yeah, I'll tell you, you have my sympathy. If I could tie a fly like that with my 2 good eyes, oh, that's great.
That's all it takes.
Now, when is that going to be used? Predominantly, the hatch comes at what time of the year?
Right in our locale here, it comes on usually the 27th to the 30th of May. And it's almost exact every year. It could be due to weather conditions and geographical locations, could be a week or 10 days early or a week or 10 days late. But 95% of the time it'll be on within 1 or 2 days, and the 27th of May in central Pennsylvania.
I'll tell you, I was just thinking of a way to end this film. You know the way to end this film. I'm going to have to come back at the end of May, and I want to see you cast that fly out on the water. I want you to prove to me that it really works.
Yeah, it works.
Well, you think I could ever get you on film fishing, George?
Well,
that's asking too much.
You see, I'm expecting to catch a few.
I guess so.
Lose a few.
You mean you actually lose flies? I know.
Yeah.
I saw you hook a branch one time on the other side of the stream. You remember that day down at Spruce?
Yeah, I lose them every once in a while.
You also can cast about 6 foot under a branch too. I've seen that too.
Yeah.
Well, that was.
You lose some. I lose. I left 3 or 4 flies and fish last week. I was using too light a stuff for the size of fish that I had hooked, and
well, you have to hook smaller fish.
They ran back under the banks and brush and broke me off. But I was using lighter stuff than I normally use.
Well, when you fish, I didn't ask you this question. When you fish dry flies, do you usually fish one, or do you fish a dropper wet? I know I've seen you fish with a wet dropper. And
no, not with. If I'm fishing dry fly, I just use one fly. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe on a rare occasion, I might have been fishing a cast of 2 wet flies, and I saw a fish taking a dry off the surface, and I might have tied a dry fly on the end and fished it, but I wouldn't fish that way. That'd be a rare thing. Maybe once in a million times I'd ever fish a dry fly with a wet fly on, because it wouldn't float right.
That's what I wondered. That was a long time ago in the spring when we went down. I think they had a few fellas down there fishing at Rod and Gun Club at Spruce. Spruce is your favorite stream.
Well, I like it because there isn't so much competition, but I fish all the streams. In fact, I get tired fishing down there, and I go to the open streams, and I fished this year. I fished Young Woman's Creek, Fishing Creek. I fished Laurel Run. I fished about 10 other different streams this year in Pennsylvania. I fished only one in New York, up in the Ausable, up at Lake Placid a couple weeks ago. And but that stream's a little too tough for me now. It's so rocky that I can't wade it.
Well, one of these days we're going to have to get you down to New Jersey. You keep saying you're coming down. We have to get you tied up with one of those 8 or 10 pound blues on a fly rod.
I know what they're like. I never caught an 8 or 10 pounder, but I caught 4 to 6 pounders, and they're a great fish on a fly rod.
Well, I appreciate the time you've given to me here to try my camera out and to see what kind of results we have. I'll be anxious to go to the Penn State West Virginia game tomorrow, but I'll be anxious Sunday when I get home to plug this in the TV and see what we have turned out.
Yeah, okay.
All right, George. I appreciate it. Thanks, and have a good homecoming.
All right, same to you. That's a pretty scene.
Well, this is the day after the Penn State West Virginia homecoming game, and on the way home, I stopped by to say hello to Joe Humphreys that happened to be home, and he showed me something that he had just received, and it's kind of amazing and it's kind of great to see on film. Joe, you have something there. You said you have an old fish, and I can't believe this, so I had to get it on film. It's something that...
Doug, let me tell you about this fish. You know, I didn't catch this one yesterday. This fish is 40 million years old. Came out of a digging in Wyoming. A gentleman by the name of George Trimble gave me this, who was one of the past vice presidents of Exxon, and who went with Reynolds and brought their oil business back on its feet. He's a close friend of mine, and this is a gift from him to me. And this was written up, digging was written up in National Geographic. This is in the August '85 issue. And this thermal explosion happened so fast, it just froze everything in time. Like this big fish engulfing a smaller one. So I think it's rather phenomenal that this masterpiece was found, and they're so perfectly preserved. Every little rib, every little fiber in the fin, the tooth, the eye, it's almost a perfect fish.
That is
Very,
amazing.
very few of these. So here I am along a trout stream.
Now, is that a native or a stockfish?
I believe you'd call that a real native.
That's a real native.
That has to be a real native.
Well, that's great.
Here we are along this beautiful little trout stream, looking at the present and the past here at the same time.
That is. That's true. It's a real great comparison.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I have a rod in my truck. I think I'm going to say goodbye in a little while, and I'm going to head downstream. And I know the fish are spawning, so I'm not going to fish too long, but I just want to loosen up for about the half hour on the way home.
Well, you can do that. What a better way to
All right, Jay. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Chuck.